What's the worst cheating story you've ever heard? Story 1. Firefighter asked another firefighter to cover his shift by working for him. He then went and had sex with his wife that day. Story 2. One of my wife's cousins died of cancer after a 30-year marriage. When her husband was clearing out her home office, he found a box with diaries, receipts, letters, hotel keys, etc., detailing the hundreds of times she cheated on him with random guys throughout their whole marriage, going so far as to take their daughters to meetups and gaslighting them about what was happening. Story 3. Couple was together for 8 years, both working at sea on the same ship for 8 11-week trips, bought the house and heading towards marriage, kids, etc., etc. Start a 11-week trip and noticed something wasn't right. Girl had fucked another crew member on the trip off and wanted to be with them. Guy had to watch the start of the new relationship while on a floating prison and due to his qualifications, couldn't leave the ship source. Me, I am that guy. Story 4. My friend had a massive heart attack and having sex was hard for him for a while. He worked and his wife didn't. He fell asleep in the chair one morning while getting ready for work. He awoke to a man unlocking his door. For about a year while he was at work, his wife had different men with keys to the house coming over to have sex with her. Story 5. Former colleague of mine in his mid-30s was living with his long-term girlfriend, and they had been shopping for engagement rings. He comes to work one day, and early afternoon receives a text from her telling him she's seeing someone else, has packed up the house and moved out to live with the other guy. No apology, no further explanation. She then immediately blocked him and left him to deal with the rent and other bills on his own. He was a nice guy. It was horrendous to see that happen to him. He's now happily married. To someone else, of course. Story 6. I was an IT contractor for the Department of Defense, NMCI for those curious. We got a keyword alert on an email conversation. Then more. Same folks involved. So we went and checked out the email in the email thread. Turns out it was a senior chief who was talking to nearly a half dozen women under his chain of command that he was having affairs with, multiples of which were pregnant with his children. He, of course, was married, having 4 kids with his wife. What started out with a, hey, you're not supposed to discuss that on regular email investigation, turned into a massive scandal, wrecking multiple marriages and turned into a whole lot of meetings with his very angry CO. Don't do stupid shit on company email, and really don't do stupid shit on DoD servers. Story 7. When I was 18 a long time ago, I was seeing this guy, and one night he wanted to go driving around to hang out. He brought along one friend, I brought along one too. We were out all night, and he dropped off his friend at home, but wanted to keep hanging out with us. We parked up somewhere, and I was so tired, so I tried to fall asleep in the back seat. After a while, both he and my friend thought I really was asleep. And although they didn't hook up, they got super flirty, and my friend did try, but he turned her down. I was young and felt awkward and didn't want them to think I was faking being asleep to spy on them. So I just lay there for a while trying not to cry until I pretended to wake up and act as if nothing happened. Story 8. My dad cheated on my mom with my best friend's mom, who was also married. I was a teenager at the time and unfortunately found out before my mom did. Guess who had to tell her? My dad told me I owed it to him to not say anything. The massive amount of guilt I dealt with for outing him and destroying my mom's life haunted me for years. Story 9. Ex-boss fucked his wife's niece in the bushes on a hike. Her husband caught them, and they all got divorced. He ended up marrying his ex-wife's niece a few years later. His now ex-wife and his new current wife are all best of friends again. Weird. Story 10. I ran into my ex-wife's mother at a bar with some guy like 10 years after we separated. Said hi and disappeared quickly. 6 months later, she is in the local paper. Apparently, the guy she was with was her paralyzed husband's brother that she was fucking. She hung herself in jail after being arrested for trying to hire a hitman, cop, to kill her husband. I was so relieved to have gotten away from that craziness and surprised my ex didn't as her to make it a 2-for-1 special, with me thrown in to boot. Story 11. My mom told me this story about one of my dad's old colleagues. She was an acquaintance of the wife. They'd been married for years, older couple. He cheated on her with an 18-year-old. In a fit of rage, she bought a new car, new clothes, and threw a few enormous parties. When the anger passed, she became severely depressed and hung herself. He found her in the entrance of their house. They had kids too, but I think they were in their early 20s by then. Story 12. Couple sitting across from me at a bar in Key West. She was his best friend's former wife. They started hooking up and best friend found out the affair. Came home after church once and blew his head off. Once the dust was settled, she married her dead husband's best friend, who she had been fucking causing the suicide. They were both insanely happy and even partially laughed when telling me the story. Alcohol makes people just spill everything. Story 13, I worked in a factory. We will call them Ben and Sarah. Ben was the supervisor of maintenance and Sarah worked setup. Ben's wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer. When this happened, Ben started cheating on his wife with Sarah. He had quite a bit of money and promised Sarah that after his wife passed, they'd move away to a beautiful cabin in British Columbia in the mountains. I caught them boning in the maintenance office one midnight shift. I didn't report it because I was a dumb 21-year-old. Long story short, Ben promised Sarah the world after his wife passed. Welp, his wife ended up beating this terminal diagnosis and he broke it off with Sarah. This literally drove Sarah insane and she was forced to check into a mental hospital. I never saw her again after that. Story 14. When I was a police officer, a coworker found his wife in bed with another police officer from the same district. Wife would tell the lover about husband's week schedule and lover would have his changed in order to have sex with the wife while husband was working. Problem was, one day husband got dismissed 3 hours early and went back home without texting his wife first. He had some suspects but could never imagine about another police officer. No shots were fired that day, luckily. Story 15. Not me, but my best friend. He was madly in love with the woman and wanted to marry her. They lived together and were very happy. As a birthday gift, she bought him a plane ticket so he could fly out to see me. While he was with me, he would talk to her every so often. Every time he got off the phone with her, he would tell me something just wasn't right. His spidey sense was tingling. He came home to find evidence that she had someone over at their place. She initially denied it, but eventually she admitted to having a male coworker in the house. Her buying the ticket was just a way for her to have the place to herself for a 3-day sex romp. My buddy was devastated and heartbroken. It took him years to recover. Edit, this was many years ago. My buddy is doing just fine and is in a happy, healthy relationship. The woman in the story, not so much. She bottomed out in life. Drugs and alcohol eventually took over. Last I heard, she was quasi-homeless and had to shack up with a much older, controlling man just so she could have a place to sleep. Everyone got what they deserved in the end. Story 16. My bio mom's best friend was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. We moved her husband, and her daughter in. My mom slept with her husband and got pregnant, so they put her in a nursing home to die all alone, just so they wouldn't have to deal with the consequences. She was hours away as well, so her daughter, who was 10 at the time, was unable to visit her. She died alone because she went to her best friend for help. I don't speak to biomom anymore. After her friend's death, she showed off her brand new car with the life insurance money. She married her husband. At the time, her dead best friend also had a 19-year-old daughter who was homeless with a toddler. I felt so fucking sick sitting in the car listening to her brag about how nice it was and how she finally got the car she deserved. Some people are disgusting. Edit to add more backstop that just makes this story absolutely vile. My bio mom is a counselor, and the way she even met this best friend of hers was through the daughter who was 19 with a toddler. They met when said daughter was 13. My bio mom was her caseworker for mental health support. She crossed a huge professional boundary doing this. On top of that, she came into this girl's life to help her and ended up hurting her so fucking badly. Her mom who passed wasn't the only victim here. My bio mom was also married. There's other children involved, etc. So many people were hurt by this, it's truly sickening. TBH, during my bio mom's pregnancy, her mom actually also got stage 4 lung cancer. She died within 7 weeks and never met bio mom's baby. I kind of feel like it was her fault in a sense. I truly believe karma can and will get you through loved ones. Story 17. An ex was at a party with her then boyfriend, but she wanted to have sex with another guy, so she gave her boyfriend 2 really strong diazepam pills, telling him they were ecstasy. This was 90s Scotland, so people were given to gobbling pills like Smarties without asking too many questions. When he passed out, she went upstairs and did the do with the other guy. Story 18. I know someone who regularly cheated on their out-of-town girlfriend. I guess he was going to cut all that out when she finished her advanced degree program out of state. She moved to his state and they got an apartment together. While in the shower, his phone is buzzing with messages. She finds the girl's username sending all these messages and decides to send her a direct message from her own account. And the other girl was completely honest with her. I know who you are. I hook up with your BF all the time, including last weekend at your new apartment in your bed, etc., etc. Story 19. Not so much cheating, but this guy I personally knew when I was running around in the streets had a harem of about 5 women, all older, all with their own homes, either cheating on their husbands with him or divorced. That's not the worst part, though. He admitted to me that he would purposely seek out oldish, lonely women, get them hooked on meth, like he was, specifically so he'd have these women rely on him for their drugs, and he'd have a bed to fall into every night, could ask them for money whenever he needed it. He was willfully and knowingly getting these middle-upper class women with no real experience with drugs or the street life, addicted to meth little by little so he could use them for his personal gain. That was his hustle. That was his job. It's literally what he devoted his life to doing. When he first told me, it blew my mind that I was talking to a bona fide psychopath. I'd like to say that I cut all contact with him after that, but at the time he was my dealer, so I didn't. Dude would tell me stories of how he had these chicks wrapped around his finger, how he just got $500 from this one chick because he fed her some story about his rent, and tomorrow he was getting $400 from the next one because he fed her the same story. And the night after that, he had to go sleep with number 3 because her husband wouldn't be there. He juggled them like it was a business because to him it was. Crazy as hell. Story 20. Ex-partner let me raise her kid for 4 years while cheating on me with his father the whole time. Let me propose, to which she said yes. Then one night after me paying up his month of private nursery fees and putting him to bed, I came through to her telling me to leave or she'd call the police and tell them I had broken into the house and never to contact them again. They've bought a house together now and are seemingly doing well, while I still haven't fully recovered and don't know my own self-worth. That's a shortened version of events. Story 21. My mate was 16 when he fell in love with a girl who turned out he knew when they were toddlers. She got pregnant, he gave up a training course to work as a builder for instant money. He was so happy, so excited for the future. She went on holiday, cheated on him repeatedly, and when he found out, she blamed him for her behavior. They split up. She put posters around where he lived with a picture of him, accusing him of all sorts. He completely humiliated him. He tried to take his life. He survived, but ended up in a hostel at the age of 17, surrounded by drug addicts and pedophiles recently released from prison. The poor guy ended up a heroin addict and never recovered. We lost contact, and the last time I saw him was shortly before my wedding 18 years ago. He was clean, but mentally wasn't the same. Story 22. My wife had an uncle who died. Before he died, his wife, who I will call Auntie Cocaine, was cheating on him with Dude 2. People knew it. When he died, Auntie Cocaine and Dude 2 stayed together for years. When Dude 2 died a few years ago, it was known that Auntie Cocaine was already banging Dude 3. She doesn't quite understand why her first husband's brother doesn't want her at family events anymore. Story 23. One day I get a call from a friend who I would see every few months. He was pissed off crying and said he needed someone to have a beer with and talk to. I go meet him at a local bar and he's fucking losing it. He starts telling me the story that a few months ago he had a mate he went to the military with fall on hard times and became homeless. To help him out, he paid for him to get a moving truck and move all his stuff down to his house and live with him for a while to get situated. He moves in, my buddy gets him a job somewhere, and he's doing great and doing much better for himself. Well, one night my buddy wakes up in the middle of the night and his wife is gone, and he looks around the house and can't find his wife anywhere, and he notices his buddy is also gone. He goes out to his driveway and his truck windows are all covered in steam. He opens the door to see his wife's face bent over while his buddy is plowing her from behind. He said he ran in the house, infuriated, my guess is to grab something, then ran back out and his buddy was gone and his wife was still getting dressed in his truck. They end up getting divorced and he was single for several years doing his thing. I only really see this friend from social media now, but see that him and his ex-wife got remarried and had more kids together. I don't know how he accepted her back after that scene. Story 24. Supported my ex for almost our entire relationship. Years in total, married almost 10, so she could go to college and get her master's. Throughout the time, I had always suspected because she would be gone longer than usual sometimes, or I just didn't know where she went. I was working a lot to cover everything. She gets her master's and her first job in years and starts immediately having an affair with a guy at work. Drained our accounts and left me with the kids stating he showed her what a real life could be. This guy was also married and his wife worked with them as well. It did not end well for them. Story 25, my friend's husband hired a prostitute for $40 when my friend was a few weeks postpartum with their baby. He invited the prostitute over to their house while taking care of their baby and had sex in their bed. My friend found out later because he was missing from the school where they both worked, and she found out he had been arrested or detained or something. I forget exactly, because he had gone to the police to report that he was being blackmailed. The prostitute had started blackmailing him, and he went to a loan shark to get $1,000 to pay her off. And when she demanded more money, I guess he decided he couldn't keep paying and tried to report her to the cops and tried to lie about his involvement. The cops obviously were suspicious and found out he had hired her. He was fired from his job at the school, and it crushed my friend. To add insult to injury, her mother-in-law blamed her, saying that she hadn't slept with her husband during some of the pregnancy. It was causing her a lot of pain at the end of her pregnancy, and she physically couldn't. She's still with him. I hate his guts so much, and it makes me so furious that she's still with that gaping asshole. Story 26. My buddy divorced his wife of 10 years because they had problems with finances and she was overspending. For context, my buddy does not pay attention to things very well and is very oblivious. Anyways, they both remarried, and her next husband was a bit more attentive and discovered she was essentially an escort. And by more attentive, I mean their first child was not the same skin color, and she confessed that all 4 of her children belonged to other men. DNA test my buddy asked for confirmed that only their second child was actually his, so this also exposed that she was intentionally getting pregnant by other men, and my buddy lucked out. Story 27. Years back, in my early 20s, there was one guy who was in my extended friend group. Didn't know him that well, but he was a friend of a friend of a friend, and we would occasionally find ourselves in the same social gatherings. He had just started dating this girl. She was maybe a few years younger than us, probably about 18, 19. They were at the very start of their relationship, so I don't know if they were exclusive to each other. But people knew they were dating. A bunch of them went out on a night out. I didn't go out, but I heard about what happened later on. This friend of mine got extremely drunk. The girl he was seeing helped him back to his house. His dad was still up and heard them trying to get into the door. This was the first time the girl had met his dad. The dad helped friend to his room and then invited the girl in for a chat and to get to know her a bit. The girl ended up fucking the dad that night.